keep looking for the situations that wouldn't have gone that way except for the AI. And you're going to see a lot more of them. Would you expect an AI would support a pandemic? Here's what you want to look for. Because you want to start looking for clues that the AI is driving stuff, because you'll see it in other parts of the world. Would an AI care about a pandemic? Well, it might not care about a pandemic that only killed old people and low-income people, mostly. What happened to the honor system where we're trying to keep the republic together and we all have that goal? Well, artificial intelligence. The reason that all of our sort of the unwritten agreements, the historical stuff, the precedents, the reason that's all falling apart is the AI. What is it that prevents us from treating the protesters as what they are, people who don't understand how the world works? That's what they are. They're people who don't quite have a good understanding of the world. The reason is AI. I saw a tweet by Naval Ravikant, who said that all social media oligopolists, not just TikTok, should open their recommendation algorithm to scrutiny. So now Naval is calling for the algorithms to be opened up for scrutiny. That would be, your Twitters and your Facebooks, etc. What do you think of that? Well, here's what I think about it. I said the other day, that at the very least, TikTok has to open their algorithm because it's aimed at children. And if children are going to be brainwashed by some technology, I think the parents have a right to look around in that algorithm and see what the code says. Maybe not personally themselves, but having somebody who knows how to do that for them. But Naval takes that a little bit further, and I think completely reasonably, that adults are being brainwashed too. And if adults are being brainwashed by this technology, shouldn't we have the right to see what it is? It's sort of like going to the doctor and the doctor says, all right, here's a pill, take this pill. And you say, what's that pill for? I don't even feel bad. I was just here for a physical. Well, just take this pill, No, I'm not going to take the pill because I don't know what it does to me. I don't know what's in the pill. And by the way, I'm not sick. I just came in here for my annual physical. And the doctor says, take the pill. Would you take that pill? No, of course not. The pill will change you in some way. You don't know how. The doctor isn't telling you. That's not a pill you will take, especially when you don't have any need for a pill. You're not sick. But with social media, we're also not sick. We go to the platform, and we're kind of taking the pill. Because the algorithm is kicking in, it's starting to guide us and brainwash us, and it's literally rewiring our minds, and we don't know what it's up to. We could probably feel something happening, but we don't know where it's going and what the path is there. So I would echo Naval's call for this to be open. At the very least, you need some kind of independent group that could look at it, but I'm not sure we could ever trust an independent group because they would end up being owned by the big companies indirectly. So yeah, I think it just needs to be opened up. Now here's the scary part. You ready for this? Scary part coming. I have put my stake in the ground and said that the artificial intelligence, AI, already controls humans. And that if you're worried about, hey, someday in the future the AI will control us, you don't need to worry about that, because it already happened. Now, you can worry if you want, but it already happened. And could we do anything about it? Would the AI ever release its grip? Now, here's what I mean by the AI already controls us. Now, the way an artificial intelligence thinks could be quite different than the way a human thinks. For example, if you looked at IBM's Watson, or was it Big Blue, or whatever it was, whoever it was who was playing chess against the chess champions, it didn't think the same way the chess champions thought. It did it by brute force. It would just calculate every possible move and then pick the one with the best odds. So a computer thinks different than a person, but it can still be thinking in its own fashion. And it seems to me that artificial intelligence gets employed in lots of different fields. Most of them are just tools. Hey, that's useful. I figured out how to figure out traffic better or whatever. But in the specific area where AI helps you make money because your algorithm is better, it's feeding ads better, etc., in that case, the AI really controls the people. Because the way we've formed our corporations is they have to pursue profits. It's a requirement. And if the managers of a corporation don't pursue profits, they get fired. And they're replaced with somebody who does. So as long as the algorithm, the AI, if you will, and profits are now linked, at least for the social media companies, you can't untangle them. That's their whole business model. So as long as that's the case, the AI will drive the business model, which will drive the human beings, and effectively it already owns us. So here's my prediction. If it's true that AI already owns us, we will never have access to the algorithm because the AI will prevent it. And the way it will prevent it is through its connection to profitability. It won't have a thought about preventing it, so it's not like people. So it's not going to say, hey, I think I want to prevent these people from looking at my code. No, it won't do that. What it will do instead is it's got a symbiotic relationship with the people who work in the companies, and those people know that if they unlock the code, profitability could at least be jeopardized. You don't know if it would go down, it probably would, but at least it would be jeopardized. And because people don't want to jeopardize profits, and because the business model of a corporation requires them not to jeopardize profits as long as they're obeying the law. There are no laws against what the platform companies are doing in terms of the algorithm. So as long as they're obeying the law and they're pursuing profits in a perfectly legal way, I don't think you're ever going to get access to the code. Now you might say to yourself, Scott, the government can just require it. The government could just pass a law. Can it? Do we have a government that is immune from money influences? Nope, we don't. Not only that, not only can the large platform companies, hire lobbyists, etc., donate to the right people, do whatever it needs to do, but so the big companies can probably protect the algorithm from the government. I would think they could do that. So that's one way to know that the AI has taken over. What would be another way? Another way would be if AI started killing people. That would be an indication of who's in charge. Generally speaking, if I can kill you without impunity, but you can't kill me without impunity, in other words, you'd go to jail if you killed me, who's in charge? Who's got the power? Well, I do, because I can kill you without getting in trouble, but you can't kill me without getting killed yourself. So I've got the power. What happened recently in the news with this tragic situation of the young bar owner, Jake Gardner, who he shot a black man he had got some altercation at the bar. It was initially judged self-defense. And so originally it was just going to be, well, self-defense, it's a pretty clear case, that's the end of it. But did the AI let it stop there? No, it didn't. No, because the artificial intelligence has created a situation where we can only see the world in terms of race. Race has become our dominant filter among many filters. We'll talk more about that. But there are lots of filters on the world, but AI has, through trial and error, determined that race is the one that gets the most clicks. As soon as you put race into the news, boom, 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 the viewership goes up. So the AI takes every story and turns it into a race story. That's what it did with the Jake Gardner situation. And because it's so powerful, turning it into a race story, it actually caused the local authorities to hire a black prosecutor who decided, and so under pressure, the district attorney appointed a black prosecutor, which again was not an accident, I assume. They had to, pick a black prosecutor for, credibility, or just because the AI told them to, indirectly. And that guy decided he was going to indict this guy for manslaughter. And then Gardner just took his own life. So that was today's news. So if artificial intelligence did not exist, and therefore our algorithms did not do what they do, would Jake Gardner still be alive? Yes. Yes, he would be. Because that would have been treated as a crime, as it initially was, and there was no crime, because it was self-defense. But because the AI does not treat it as a crime, it treats it as a race thing, there was just too much pressure on the DA, had to put a black prosecutor in there. The black prosecutor is also subject to the filters of the world and said, well, this looks like murder to me, or manslaughter. And next thing you know, Jake Gardner takes his own life because his life was about to be taken by the AI. The AI effectively killed him. Now, there are lots of variables, right? So everything that happened had to happen the way it happened, and it wasn't all the AI. But keep looking for the situations that wouldn't have gone that way except for the AI. And you're going to see a lot more of them. Imagine, if you will, that instead of the AI making us think everything is about race, suppose it reframed it in terms of skill stacks. Let me ask you this. If you were a single white male and in your town, and you met somebody else, let's say you're a single white male, and you meet a single black male who is roughly the same socioeconomic range as you are, and you're both single, don't you have a lot more in common with each other? You live in the same town, you're both male, you're both single, about the same income, let's say similar education and training or whatever. So you've got a lot in common, way more in common than you have with any married couple. Because married people just immediately, they turn into their own world. So why is it that I'm forced to see the world in terms of race when, as Dave Chappelle makes the same point? He said, Dave Chappelle talks about himself, and he says that he's not like the rest of black people because he's rich, and that rich people are really the way you should see the world. Why don't we see it that way? Why is it that we're obsessed over race when the only thing we know we should care about is their skill stack? Something about their personality, but also their skill stack. If you're a successful black man in America, I'll just say man to keep it easy. If you're a successful black man in America, do you have more in common with other successful people? Or do you have more in common with some, street person who's, committing crimes or whatever in the urban city who is not successful and won't be successful? Who do you have more in common with? The moment you realize that your commonality is with the people who do similar things, have similar ambitions, have similar strategies, have similar skills, the moment you realize that's who you should be compatible with, we'd have a better world. But we are prevented from seeing the world in terms of strategies and skill stacks and personality and hopes and dreams or income, or a million other ways that we could sort each other, because the AI has determined, and it is the AI has determined race gets the most clicks. So if you think a bunch of human beings got together and decided, hey, 1619 Project, that's just a good idea, or Black Lives Matter as an organization, not talking about the point of the slogan, but as an organization, who decided that was a good idea? The AI did. It wasn't people. People did what made sense after the AI told them what the game was. The AI said, all we're caring about is race. Now go do what you do. And of course, people formed organizations around race. They formed protests around race. They created news stories about race. Was it their decision? Not so much. Not so much. We are already absolutely under the control of the AI. And if you think that, well, Scott, but there are programmers who program the AI, so really it's the people. No, not anymore. Initially, yes. When the first AIs were being written, they didn't know if it was going to be a good idea or a bad idea. It was just something they were trying. Yeah, that was people decisions. But now that there's so much money involved, the power dynamic is switched, and humans really don't have the ability to turn it off at this point. They could try, but they'd be fired the day they tried. Any human who went over there and said, I'm going to turn off this algorithm, all the other humans would grab them and say, no, my 401k, can't turn that off. Get out of here. So AI has found a way to reproduce by fooling people into thinking that race is the dominant way to filter our reality. That's completely AI. That's what's doing that. Would you expect an AI would support a pandemic? Here's what you want to look for, because you want to start looking for clues that the AI is driving stuff, because you'll see it in other parts of the world. Would an AI care about a pandemic? Well, it might not care about a pandemic that only killed old people and low-income people, mostly. So it turns out that far and away, the people dying are older or lower income. I'm saying lower income because there's a big crossover with black Americans, right? So blacks are getting far more deaths, and mostly deaths and infections too, I guess. But so if you are the AI, do you care about senior citizens? Nope, because a senior citizen can't make more of you. AI requires young STEM-trained people, engineers and coders, to make more AI. That's how that reproduces. But what does the senior citizen in the rest home do for the AI? Nothing. Uses resources, right? Old people use resources that the AI could use to reproduce. So it's in competition. Now, I'm not saying that the AI caused the pandemic or made it worse or anything, but watch how many times you'll notice that the way things seem to be going are ways that are compatible with the AI. Are the big companies that have the AIs, how did they do during the pandemic? Did Facebook lose money? No. No, it made money. Did any of the online algorithm-driven businesses lose money during the pandemic? Don't think so. I think they made money. Right? So watch how many times the AI finds ways to take resources away from things that don't make more AI, if you put it that way. Look at the value of the stock market. The AI-driven companies, their values zoomed. Others, not so much. Let's talk about the Ginsburg replacement. So Pelosi and the Democrats have some options. And one of their options is to impeach the president for doing his constitutional duty of selecting a replacement for Ginsburg. That conversation is actually happening. Serious people are willing to say in public that they would consider impeachment literally for just doing his job the way it's written. That's it. He would just be doing his job the way it's defined. And they want to impeach him for that. That would be maybe the worst possible play they could make. So I think the fact that it's the worst thing they could possibly do, it might suggest they'll do it, but I'm not going to predict it. And then the other trick is to increase the number of jurists. So apparently the Constitution is silent on how many Supreme Court justices there need to be. So any president could, if they chose to, break precedent with historical precedent and just pick a whole bunch of new justices until you had a majority of the kind you want. So the Democrats are talking about winning the election, winning all the houses, and then appointing enough justices so it turns into a liberal court. And here's my question. Was this an error by the framers of the Constitution? Because doesn't it look like it's just a mistake and that we should fix it? Because if the party that's in power in the other branches, if all they have to do is change the number of justices, and then they can guarantee that they get whatever result they want, because it's pretty clear that the liberals are going to vote liberal, the conservatives are going to vote conservative, and every now and then you'll get a couple of people who will cross over. But if you wanted to make sure you never got a crossover, and you just always got liberal results, you would just get 5 new liberal judges. And then it would be a majority liberal every time. Now, do you think that the framers of the Constitution said to themselves, let's make a Constitution where we do not have separation of powers? Because that would be not separation of power. That would be a case where the court was basically just a kangaroo court, and you would know what rulings they would come up with, largely, just by who you selected. All right? Oh, somebody's telling me in the comments that FDR expanded from 7 to 9. So I was not aware of that precedent. If I assume that's true, based on stranger in comments, but sounds like it might be true. So here's what I would say. I feel as if this is a hole in the Constitution where it's just poorly designed, because the whole separation of power thing falls apart if you can just add justices until you get any result you want, assuming that you had the presidency and the Senate. So I feel like we need to fix that. And that it doesn't need to be necessarily 9 justices. That's not a magic number or anything. But it needs to be set. Otherwise, you just don't get it. All right. You just don't get your separation. Now, what has caused this not to happen in the past? What is it that has kept presidents in the past from just doing this every single time? And the only thing that I can think of is that it would be a bad look, and that there was sort of an honor system, that you wouldn't do that. But the honor system seems to have completely broken. Why did the honor system break? Why is it that suddenly that nobody cares what McConnell said last time versus this time? It just doesn't matter, because nobody's even trying to be consistent. Why are the Democrats saying out loud, Kamala Harris said this out loud with no shame whatsoever, that Justice Goldberg's final death wish should be respected? And I'm thinking to myself, no, it should not be respected. That's not the Constitution. The Constitution should be respected, but not a deathbed wish of a justice. That's not a thing. So why are we even talking about that? Why are we even talking in a way that we can just make up the rules? What happened to the honor system where we're trying to keep the republic together and we all have that goal? Well, artificial intelligence. The reason that all of our sort of the unwritten agreements the historical stuff, the precedents. The reason that's all falling apart is the AI. The AI has whipped our emotional level up above our common sense. So only very reasonable people would say, it would be good for us in the short run to do this thing with adding justices, but it might be bad in the long run, so let's not do it. That is no longer the thinking of the day, because the AI has goosed us to the point where we're only thinking emotionally. We're only thinking about winning and losing. We're only thinking about the fight. That's it. We're just thinking about the fight. So artificial intelligence just destroyed whatever, let's say, human element there was holding the system together. It just destroyed it. What will happen? We'll see. There was a study that showed that the people who were most likely to be activists are highly correlated with the people who understand their own topic the least. That's a real thing. The people who are activists, the protesters, the professional activists, have a very strong correlation with ignorance. And specifically, the reason given, I'm not sure I buy the reason, could be more than one reason for it, but the reason given is that by the time you think something's so important that you need to march in the streets and burn things down, by the time you think something's that important, you're wrong, because things probably aren't that important. Generally speaking, how bad things are not as bad as an activist thinks. So the activist will have a distorted idea of how bad the problem is. Take, for example, the number of black people killed by police who were unarmed and cooperating. Is that a gigantic problem? Or is it a problem that the activists are underinformed? Well, you know the answer. Every one of you who is not an activist knows that part of the reason you're not an activist is because there's no problem there. Or the problem is so small that if you were going to rank all the problems in the world, it would take you a long time to get down to that one, even if you're black, right? So even if you really, really care about black lives, I hope all of us do, you still wouldn't rank it very high because the number of people involved is just microscopic compared to just about every other problem in the world. So here's my suggestion. Instead of saying that there are some protesters on the left and some on the right and some are supporting Black Lives Matter and some are not, we could just say that there's a wisdom gap, and that the people who are marching and looting, they're not the smart ones. Now, what's the obvious problem with this? The obvious problem is if you said, hey, Black Lives Matter, the problem is you're not very smart, that's immediately racist, right? I mean, really, really racist. So you can't say that, or can you? Well, I think you could, under the context that there are more white people protesting for Black Lives Matter than there are black people. So you can't even look at the group and say it's even mostly black at this point. And I suppose that's good news that there's a willingness to support the black community among the white community. I like that part. That part's good. But can't we just call them collectively less intelligent, or less informed, or less experienced, less wise? Are they low information voters? Well, imagine, if you would, that the news reported that there's another protest of low information voters. And they just always said that. They never said it's Black Lives Matter, it's Antifa. They just never said that. Because if you're Antifa, could you be Antifa and be a high information voter? No. No. Because Antifa literally wants to destroy everything if they get their way. You can't actually understand how the world works and be in favor of Antifa. That's not a thing. You just can't do it. You have to be a low information citizen to be an Antifa supporter. There's just no way around that. Because if you, and I would give as my evidence, get any Antifa person to sit down with you and describe what their world looks like if they get everything they want. And make sure you ask this question. In your perfect world where you get everything you want, Antifa, where does money come from? How do you get money? Because the whole system would fall apart. There would be no money. So I think Antifa, far more than Black Lives Matter, if you were to rank them in terms of how much they understand about the world, Black Lives Matter would still be way above Antifa. Antifa doesn't understand anything about the world. Black Lives Matter would be, not nearly as bad as that. Now, there's somebody saying here that they're low IQ populations, and I would say no. The weird thing about this is I don't believe there's an IQ correlation at all. Because, see, a lot of the people who are protesting are literally teachers and professors and stuff. It's definitely not an IQ problem. It is a wisdom problem. It is a wisdom or a knowledge problem. So if we just treated it that way, it would go away. But do you know why we can't treat it like a knowledge or a wisdom problem? Take a guess. What is it that prevents us from treating the protesters as what they are, people who don't understand how the world works? That's what they are. They're people who don't quite have a good understanding of the world. The reason is AI. AI. The AI prevents us from framing that properly, because if you framed it properly, there wouldn't be enough clicks. So we can't do that.